Tonight on Why Not Files, the accidentally redacted life of William Pembroke, the only child genius who got put on a government watch list for correcting his kindergarten teacher too aggressively.
Let me guess. Another Wonderkin story where the moral is never be smarter than your FBI handler.
By age 2, he'd written a thesis proving Santa Claus couldn't possibly deliver presents without violating thermodynamics. The North Pole sent a cease and desist.
Kid sounds like he was 50% neurons, 50% untreated ADHD, and 100% why we can't have nice things.
His parents weren't just academics. They were basically a DARPA side project. Mom cracked Soviet codes using baby William's babbling as encryption keys.
So wait, he could bend space-time but couldn't bend the rules of nap time? Priorities, man.
At 5 years old, he solved the Riemann hypothesis, but couldn't solve why the other kids screamed when he explained it using their crayons as props.
Spoiler! His greatest invention was a machine that made people wish they'd failed kindergarten.
The University of Chicago admitted him at 10, then immediately regretted it when he kept submitting homework in future math they couldn't grade yet.
Hold on. His parents used him to peer review their classified research papers. That's not parenting, that's academic warfare.
Stick around for how the FBI accidentally recruited him during a Bring Your Kid to Work Day, why 3 Nobel Prize winners owe their careers to his stolen lunchbox notes, and the tragic reason his only friend was a janitor who pretended to understand quantum mechanics. Correction. The CIA didn't technically experiment on him. They just observed his potential while he was busy observing the observers. Standard procedure. William was born in Chicago, Illinois, in December 1920. His parents, Professor Eleanor Vance and Dr. Alastair Pembroke, were a pioneering astrophysicist and an accomplished linguist, respectively. Though Eleanor faced skepticism as a woman in academia, her groundbreaking work on stellar spectroscopy earned her a tenured position at the University of Chicago by 1925, a rare achievement for the era. Their home was filled with books, scientific instruments, and lively intellectual exchange. From infancy, it was clear William was different, with a mind that absorbed information at an astonishing rate. Doctors speculated he had hypothymesia, an extraordinary memory condition, though his parents kept this private to protect him. They were both astonished and humbled by his intellectual gifts. His upbringing was a unique blend of academic rigor and creative exploration. Even before he was born, his mother read him passages from scientific journals and classic literature. Their home library contained works in English, Spanish, German, and Sanskrit, all of which his parents had mastered. They nurtured both his mind and body, though William later confided in diaries that their relentless focus on his intellect left him emotionally adrift. His mother dedicated herself entirely to his intellectual development. His nursery wasn't filled with typical baby toys, but with mobiles featuring astronomical charts and linguistic symbols. By 4 months, he recognized constellations. At 6 months, his first word was quasar, and by 8 months, he was speaking in complete sentences.
Wow, my first word was food. This kid's was dying star. Already setting the tone, huh?
Correction. Quasars are actively dying. So technically, his first word was a cry for help. By his first birthday, he comprehended abstract concepts and followed complex instructions in multiple languages. At 18 months, he was reading newspapers and discussing current events. His parents hired tutors to verify his abilities. One noted he could recite entire pages of Goethe's Faust in German after a single reading. He effortlessly acquired Italian, Russian, and Mandarin Chinese from their extensive library. At 2 years old, he began to express original ideas, formulating hypotheses about the universe and writing poetry in several languages. One poem, scribbled in a mix of Sanskrit and English, pondered the loneliness of celestial bodies, a metaphor that haunted his later writings. His intellectual curiosity was insatiable. He constantly questioned the fundamental principles of existence. At 3, he delved into advanced calculus and theoretical physics, poring over textbooks that challenged even graduate students. To contextualize his progress, his father arranged informal exams with university colleagues who begrudgingly acknowledged his genius. By 5, he had developed his own system of symbolic logic, though he struggled to explain it to others, a frustration that foreshadowed his later social struggles. His parents knew his education required a radically different approach. Traditional schooling was inadequate for his extraordinary intellect. However, their attempts to enroll him in specialized institutions met with skepticism. One headmaster warned, "Your son's mind may be unparalleled, but his heart remains a child's. This imbalance will break him." Many educators worried about his social development. Despite these obstacles, he flourished under his parents' tutelage. At 7, he passed the University of Chicago entrance exam with the highest score ever recorded. Yet his admission was deferred due to his age.
Let me get this straight. They wouldn't admit him because he was too young, but child coal mines were totally fine in 1927.
Priorities. America needed its future both educated and with black lung. The dean wrote, "We cannot risk the scrutiny of admitting a child, no matter his brilliance." Similar rejections followed from Stanford and Caltech. Finally, at 10, he was admitted to the University of Chicago, becoming the youngest student in its history. A local newspaper headline read, "Prodigy or Circus Act?" Chicago's boy wonder divides academia. While his intellectual achievements were celebrated, his time at the University of Chicago was marked by profound social challenges. A child prodigy in an environment of adults, he attracted both admiration and envy, creating isolation and alienation. He once wrote in a letter, "They ask me about quarks, but never about cartoons or baseball. I am a specimen, not a person." His interactions were largely confined to academic discussions. Typical college social life was elusive. His parents tried to help, encouraging the university to include him in social activities. They organized a disastrous birthday party with undergraduates, where William spent the hour correcting a classmate's flawed understanding of relativity.
Ah, yes. Nothing bonds undergrads like a toddler explaining why their beer pong strategy violates thermodynamics.
To be fair, he did calculate the exact angle to spike the punch. With plutonium, the social divide persisted. Neither typical college student nor child, he existed in a liminal space, unable to fully connect with either group. He continued his studies, graduating summa cum laude at 15, having already published several groundbreaking papers. His thesis on quantum entanglement was later cited by Einstein, though the two never met.
So Einstein stole from a kid? Man really said, E equals MC your homework.
Technically, it was E equals MC, I'm not paying child support. He pursued graduate studies at the University of Chicago, but social pressures intensified. A group of jealous peers spread rumors he had cheated on exams, leading to a humiliating investigation that cleared him but shattered his trust in institutions. He became the target of bullying, often fueled by jealousy. His parents, witnessing his distress, transferred him to Princeton, hoping for a more supportive environment. At Princeton, he pursued a doctorate in theoretical physics and worked as a research assistant. However, this experience further exacerbated his social isolation. During a lecture, a student sneered, "Who let the kid teach?" A moment William recounted in therapy decades later.
Wait, they let a teenager teach grad students? That's not academia, that's just soft for nerds.
The real torture was his lecture on Why You'll Never Be As Smart As Me. Lasted 7 minutes and 3 marriages. He felt uncomfortable instructing older students and collaborating with older colleagues. The students struggled to comprehend his explanations, leading to frustration and self-doubt. He began compulsively rewriting his notes, filling margins with anxious doodles of locked doors and tangled strings. Ultimately, he resigned from Princeton at 19. He enrolled in Yale Law School, gaining admission with ease, but the pattern repeated itself. A professor remarked, "He could argue circles around the Supreme Court, but he couldn't order a coffee without trembling." After 2 years, he dropped out, deeply disillusioned. Accounts of his struggles varied. He spoke of the relentless torment he endured from his peers, including a prank where classmates replaced his lecture notes with nursery rhymes, while others claimed he was socially awkward. A classmate admitted, We were cruel because he made us feel ordinary, and that was unforgivable. Regardless, it was clear that he struggled to find his place in a world ill-equipped to accommodate his extraordinary intellect. In his early 20s, he became involved in fringe political movements. His manifesto, The Tyranny of Normalcy, argued that society punished outliers like him, a thesis born of personal anguish. His inability to connect with people on a personal level made him vulnerable to extremist ideologies. He participated in radical protests and advocated for utopian social reforms, often clashing with mainstream American politics. During a 1945 rally, he shouted, "You fear my mind because yours are shackled," a line later misquoted to paint him as unhinged. His activism led to his arrest and a brief period of incarceration. In jail, he taught inmates calculus in exchange for protection, a bittersweet glimpse of connection. His parents secured his release. However, this experience only deepened his sense of alienation and resentment. He withdrew further from society, harboring bitterness and a growing conviction that he was fundamentally misunderstood. He burned his childhood journals in a fit of despair, later regretting the loss of his only honest conversations. His parents, deeply concerned, arranged for him to undergo a year of intensive therapy, hoping to help him develop coping mechanisms. His therapist noted, "He views emotions as equations to solve, yet they terrify him, a paradox he cannot reconcile." Upon his release, he sought anonymity, taking a series of menial jobs: warehouse clerk, night watchman, and dishwasher. He adopted the alias Henry Strauss and found fleeting solace in the simplicity of routine, though he often muttered equations under his breath while scrubbing pans. He sought refuge from the intellectual demands that had plagued him, hoping to find normalcy. Yet even in these humble settings, he struggled to connect with his co-workers and perform his duties effectively. A co-worker recalled, "Henry once sorted an entire shipment by prime numbers. The boss fired him, but we all knew he was someone else."
Finally, a relatable king! Nothing says mental breakdown like aggressively Pythagorean silverware.
The fork placement was irrational, just like his student loan debt. His inability to navigate social dynamics and his difficulty with practical skills only deepened his despair. Job after job, the pattern repeated itself. His early fame and the media's portrayal of him as a tragic genius made it impossible to escape his past. Reporters stalked him, publishing photos of America's failed prodigy buying groceries in threadbare coats. He adopted pseudonyms and wore disguises to avoid recognition. The relentless negativity of the press took a heavy toll on him and his parents. Their attempts to sue the newspapers were unsuccessful. A judge dismissed their case, declaring, "Genius is a public spectacle, whether it wills it or not." His life became a cruel paradox. His extraordinary intelligence, once a source of wonder, became a crushing burden, isolating him from society and preventing happiness. In a final unsent letter to his parents, he wrote, "I am a star that burned too bright, and now I float alone in the dark."
Cool. So moral of the story, dumb fish like me live longer.
Exactly. Stay stupid, stay happy. And if you are a genius, for God's sake, fake a food allergy. His heartbroken parents died in despair, their obituaries reduced to footnotes in their son's infamous legacy. In January 1967, he was found dead in his sparsely furnished apartment, the victim of a stroke.
Welp, time to binge-watch Paw Patrol to feel better about my wasted potential. Blorp!
He was 46 years old, alone and impoverished, a stark contrast to the luminous promise of his youth. His landlady, unaware of his identity, donated his few possessions to charity, including a dusty box of equations scribbled on napkins, later auctioned for millions. His life became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that even the greatest gifts can become a curse. Yet in quiet circles, scholars still debate his unpublished theories, wondering what might have been had the world been kinder.